Okay, so let's get to it. I think. Yeah, there we go. So today, while I was in the middle of playing this riveting game of um Eagle, I was suddenly reminded of, interestingly enough, of addiction. So that's something we'll talk about today. While I'm getting my ass kicked by this, by the neural network that was trained essentially by basically every single player ever. But before we get started on addiction, just a minor comment. We are using Leela, which itself is it's an open source version of AlphaGo that was developed, in part with Google money, and it's essentially using modern neural networks to train or using modern hardware to train a neural network that can recognize and think um, fast and hard enough to beat world pros at this game that has remained sort of outside of the professional level for decades now. Right, like we beat chess back with our boy Gary Kasparov back in 19 whatever late 1990s, and Go has been sort of the last of the holdout ancient board games that remain unsolved. And yet, in what was it, 2017, AlphaGo came out and just like destroyed LeelaZero. And that was kind of a wake up call for all of us, especially since Sidol, he's been one of our, I guess when he was younger at least, he was one of our heroes just because of how he exploded onto the scene and managed to shake up the entire world. Anyway, that's that. We're just gonna get our ass kicked by the computer, so that's all good. Don't mind me. And I'm playing with a 3 stone handicap in case anyone is interested in the game and knows what I'm talking about. So anyway, let's talk about addiction. Addiction is this interesting thing, right? Because at the fundamental level, it is essentially an expression of the what I like to term the human condition, and that is this idea that um, that there is a idealistic self of us that sort of drives us forward. It's logical. It's you know, it's modern, and then there's the reactionary self of us that is kind of what holds us back. That is not defined in any specific manner except for it is not our idealistic self. So anything that is um, that is holding us back from accomplishing what we want, whether it be laziness, addiction, more laziness, lack of knowledge, all of this, or just sheer conservatism, right? Including things like, oh, I don't know if I'm how I would do this, or I don't know if this is a good idea, all of that kind of stuff. That I would turn reactionary, and really, I just took that term from history, right? It is our reactionary self because, by definition, it is the self that wants to oppose change or oppose progress. So, what is addiction? Addiction is a fairly major component of our reactionary self, and you can see I really like combat in Eagle. I don't know why I'm gesturing at the monitor. Nobody can see that. Sorry, completely off track. Addiction is a part of the reactionary part of us, simply because it is something that the body signals, or rather, it is an error in signaling between the lower functions of the body, which include hunger, let's say physical desire, and actually, is there anything else? Yeah, and comfort. versus our ability to push past those things and be more successful. Oh my god. Anyway, so the variety of forms of addiction. Um, I'm not even going to touch upon no, I, that choice of words. I'm not even going to cover the physical desire aspects of addiction simply because it is so well documented by basically everyone everywhere. And instead, I'll talk about some of ugh, can't even enunciate properly. Some of the more nuanced and perhaps esoteric forms. And all of these are biological in nature. The buildup of our dopaminergic system, which I had thought I had talked about in our broadcast on biology, but I don't think I actually did. Anyway, dopaminergic system is the reward system, which we all know. So it's sort of this link between that system and where did they go? Oh, okay. And sort of every other system in the body, and the one that essentially drives our lower functions, right? So one of the most interesting addictions that I like to talk about is actually hunger, because hunger is essentially the addiction that we have to food. And it might not appear to be a proper addiction on first thought, but if you think about it very carefully, you can kind of imagine this. I mean, not to sound too technical, but you know, we don't want to die from not eating food because we didn't eat food. And so it's one of those very, very particular, very low level drives in the human species that drives everything forward. And so what are the um, what are the symptoms of hunger addiction? Well, I'm sure this will sound familiar to anyone who has ever studied addiction a little bit. You know, aggression when deprived of it, lethargy when deprived of it, the active seeking of the substance that we want to use, and slowly becoming more and more desperate as we go longer and longer without it. And so it might sound redundant, but we're hungry for food, just like we are hungry for other addictive substances. And and so that's why the nature of addiction is a fairly low level idea. It's not something that's very much a part of our conscious, our it's not part of our how do I say this, of the logical portions of our brain that evolved very late, but rather it is very much a part of the lesser, not lesser, earlier portions of our brain, wherein it was evolutionarily selected for over and over again, such that we are able to look at the need for food as one of our most important actions. And so that's why I sort of characterize addiction not so much as something that's part of our conscious, yeah, our logical consciousness, right? So I was going somewhere with this. Where was I going with this? Whoa, I got distracted by that AI kicking my ass. Where was I? Oh, yes. I remember. Um, what makes humans and human addictions so much more interesting compared to, say, something like a dog or a cat or, heaven forbid, a dolphin, is that the human brain is very, very much a more massive and more performant organ, in that when we get the signal from the lower parts of our brain that we're addicted to something and that we should seek it out, we're able to do much more to seek out the source of our addiction, right? So whether that's a drug addict either resorting to violence or trying to take over, trying to increase his net worth via hostile takeovers of another company. These are all sort of end results of the addiction, or these could all be end results of addiction, sort of driving us to do what feel like illogical steps. When if we thought about it more rationally, or if we had more time, or if we weren't under the influence of that particular need to drive us forward, that we would reconsider. And so that's why addiction in humans is, for the lack of a better word, so fascinating. Why it can lead us to do so many unfortunate but also very interesting things. And that's where that fundamental human condition that I was mentioning earlier comes in, right? Like, if I were to take a step back and say, something that keeps a how do I say this? No, I gotta change it up a little bit. So for example, if we talk about a person who has, say, an addiction to video games, or an addiction to reading very crappy fan fiction, um, these are all things that are self-reinforcing, in that the more we do them, the more they become our comfort zone, and the more we want to stay within our comfort zone, and so therefore the more we do them. And that very interesting but also very sort of very obvious spiral is sort of the source of all of um the source of all of that, to me at least, source of all of that degeneration. And here, but here, when I say degeneration, I don't mean that the brain or the body is physically being destroyed, but rather that it renders. So we come back to my idea of this reactionary self. We come back to that, where the degeneration is not in a visible or even a physical sense, but rather in willpower, in attention span, in in I guess just willpower and attention span, because those two sort of underpin basically all of our major functions. So regardless of the form, once we become addicted to something, it is a very it can lead into a spiral that is very hard to crawl out of. And so sometimes there might be a little pushback when you say, oh dude, what about, that addiction to food we talked about earlier. And I mean, I don't actually think that disproves my point, in that we have seen people who are so addicted to food that really, like, their entire life revolves around eating and carrying around the massive amount of mass that they attain through eating, and trying to get more resources so that they can eat more, because you have more mass to support, and therefore you're more hungry more often. And let's not even talk about the fact that, obesity actually plays with the hunger sensors and stimulates those bad boys. So really, like, in food case, yeah, that is a whole other issue. But really, like it all comes back to this idea that when we are addicted, the the addiction itself, while it is a very low level thing, it is a very much part of our more base instincts, can play complete havoc with our ability to function in society. And that's simply because it it pings so many of our necessary should I say necessary? Yeah, I guess I'll go with necessary. It pings so many of our necessary functions, or the necessary pathways for us to function as humans, that it is exceptionally hard to ignore, and therefore exceptionally hard to um, to come out of. And so 2 days ago, let me just check my notes. I think, yeah, 2 days ago when I was talking about, I guess when I was on the airplane and talking about dressing, um, partly when I was saying that we should change the way we dress just to give ourselves a new outlook is exactly that. It's when we're addicted to something, even if it's just sitting around and watching TV, that is an addiction. If it's even if it's just doom scrolling on your phone, that is an addiction. Any of these things, to break out of them, oh, I shouldn't have done that. To break out of them, we would have to actually change at least part of ourselves. And the easiest way to do that really is, or at least the easiest way to take the first step, is to off. Pretend I didn't say that. Pretend I didn't say that. The easiest first step really is to change the way you look. That's just, at least to me, that's the natural way of doing things. And as I talked about really last week, it's the little steps that you take along the way, the little victories in the short durations, that then help us build confidence and move further and further away from where we don't want to be. Not that I want to end with a cheesy proverb, but really, it if you want to go on a journey, you have to take a step, right? And where does that step happen? Or can you even bring yourself to take that step? Well, I got completely off track. Yeah.